Today I've got a really stripy sewing show for you to see. I'm sharing with you how you can achieve perfectly matching stripes on the shoulders, on the side seams when you sew. It's a super fun process. Stripe matching here and a little bit of stripe matching there, packed with sewing content for you. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and in this case, stripy sewing. I know I sew a lot of stripes and I like having fun with these stripes. I'll place them vertical and horizontal. There's lots of ways that you can use fabric that has stripes in a way that you don't need to match anything at all. And I have shown a variety of those types of garments here on the channel. It's a really fun way to sew, and anything with stripes is always just going to look super striking. The pattern I'm using to demonstrate these things today is a Vivace Dolman. This is a pattern from Love Notions that was released earlier this year. I've made several versions already. It's a great pattern. Dolman sleeves, I've got one on right now, extremely easy to sew, and the detail that really is striking and beautiful is this overlap neckline like this. I've got a video sharing how to sew this type of collar in detail so you can see it up close. I've also got a video showing how I did this specific one, which I'll touch on in a second. And I won't go much deep into a pattern review because I have done that before. Basically, in this pattern, you'll get 2 for 1 because you get separate pattern pieces to make this in a woven or a knit. Different ease, they look pretty much the same. The technique for sewing them is super the same. The only difference is that on the woven version you sew on a cuff, and on the knit version you sew on a band. There is an offset pleat in the center that meets this section here, and then you have this overlap V collar that is super fun to sew. This specific one that I'm wearing now does not have the center pleats. I was able to eliminate that super easily. I have a video about that. If you are newer to sewing and you want to try sewing a collar like this, not having the pleat there will simplify it for you, so maybe you want to give that a go. I love this. I really love this top. This is a woven version. As you know, Love Notions has Feature Friday patterns that are on the blog for Love Notions, and every single Friday there is one of the ambassadors who writes that blog post for Love Notions. And it's my turn today. The last time I did this was in March with the Melody Dolman. I've chosen the Vivace Dolman because I really like the style. I thought it's a great way to show you how to match stripes in a simple way as a first attempt if you've never done it before. And the pattern is only $5 today. It's a great price, great value, because you actually get 2 patterns in there, one for knits, one for wovens. So if you haven't got this one yet, it's a great time to get it. Because this is a new pattern, it is available in the full size range from extra small to 5XL. You have the standard bust and the full bust option, several length options, shirt, tunic, dress, all those things. I have chosen this one to film a video about stripe matching because it could be the perfect first step into stripe matching if you've never done it before. I think if you try to match the stripes on a pattern with a sleeve, there's an extra step that you need to do and more things that you need to worry about. In this case, I'm showing you the basic principles of stripe matching, and you'll see it all really up close. 2 ways that you can choose. In there you'll see which is my preference, and we will achieve perfectly matching shoulders and side seams on this Vivace Dolman dress. I've chosen a rib knit with horizontal stripes. I usually don't sew horizontal stripes, but these are very nice. The wider stripes are black and the narrower are off-white, and I really like the look, so I decided to use this one. So a very short introduction today. Let's hop right into stripe matching.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been rated down like hell. I'm weak. I have tried to give you my soul.
I have a rib knit that has a wider black stripe and a narrower beige stripe. I like that look, and I'm going to match the sides of the Vivace Dolman. I have my fabric extended. I want the fabric to stay put, to not move, and that's why you see all this excess crumpled up on the table, not hanging off. If you have fabric hanging off, it'll start pulling and creating weight and stretching your fabric horizontally and vertically before you cut it, so you don't want that. That's why you see that big mess. I'm going to cut the front, only the first half first. I'm just going to cut around there. I am going to mark that with some type of marking tool so that I know exactly where to flip it the other way and cut the other half. I'll show you what I've done to the sides there for both the front and the back. You can see the curve that starts under the arm. This is the Dolman sleeve right there. I want this little corner to start at that beige stripe. So with a pen, I marked my stripes there. I put a pen mark on every single stripe. Marking all of these like that will work if you are really set on using your paper pattern to cut the other half when you flip it the other way. Then you can align these marks to the stripes like that. That is one option that you can use to match stripes on the side. I prefer to actually use the actual fabric to match the other side. I am showing you both because I know we all have preferences when we sew, so that is one way you can do that. You find fabric that sometimes has stripes that are thinner than a thicker one, you know, whatever you find, if you mark on the side, you can even write there if you have a red stripe, a blue stripe, that sort of thing to help you match it up on the other side. This is the back pattern piece of the Vivace and I've placed it right on top of my paper here. They are the same there. They follow the same shape around here. So I've also marked the stripes there. On this one, when I want to cut out my back, if I guide myself on these lines that are marked on the paper pattern, I will end up having the stripes on the same place all along the side seam, and when I try to sew them together, they are going to match. So that is one option that you can use to match your side seams. It works really well. I'm using a mix of both methods. The Vivace has a particular shape here in the center, and I also wanted that straight edge to go along a stripe. You can see that's going along the bottom of a beige stripe. That's just going to make it easier to cut and to sew properly. I wouldn't want to have this section be right in the middle of the black stripe or the beige stripe. It would just make things more difficult. So that's something I looked at as well. I am doing the dress version and I've already made this before, so it already has my feet adjustments on there. It's looking pretty crumpled up. It is a pretty well loved and used pattern. I have added an inch here just above my bust point. I always need to do that with knit patterns usually, just for my body. Along the bottom section of the dress length where it just goes straight down, I added a shorten and lengthen line, added 2 inches there. So I have 2 inches there and 1 inch there, in a total of 3 inches extra for it to hit above the knee for my height. I've cut half. You can see I've cut it right up to there. I've followed that line there. I've cut it very carefully. And here along the center on the beige areas, I have marked with a red friction pen what is the center right there. Now I can just extend my fabric further, move it around a little bit, and then flip my pattern piece the other way, matching this center to that center that I marked right there. Okay, it's looking pretty messy. I have my half of my front right here, not dangling off the table. All the rest of the fabric is also crumpled up around there to not create weight on the fabric. I can see my center line right along there where I marked it with my friction pen. I'm going to take the front piece that I had cut previously with all the printing, all the letters looking up at me, and flip it so that the printing on the pattern is touching the fabric. I'm going to align this along the center right there. On the sides of the pattern, you can see my lines coming through it because I marked it with a Sharpie. Those are the lines that I need to align to these ones. So that little mark there needs to be on one of these stripes, and so forth. This is the most crucial one. Right, that place there has to be at the start of a beige stripe. So it would need to be there, for example. See, they match there, and then this one matches there. I just need to make sure everything's going to match like that when I cut out my second half of the front. I have aligned all my marks here of the pattern against the stripes of the fabric. You can see how they align everywhere. 2 little lines everywhere. I've checked against how it finishes at the hem. At the hem, it ends right on a beige stripe, and my other side that I have here is correct, ending right at a beige stripe. Just double check those things that you have got everything perfect. When you've taken the time to match the side seams and everything along here, the shoulders will be identical to the other side as well. So if I flip my other half right here on top, you're going to see the exact same thing right there. You see how everything matches? I'll have a little piece of black on the top and it'll be the same on this other side. So if you didn't want to flip the pattern piece like I have done here, align it along the center that you've marked with something, you could have just used your fabric without the pattern piece. Just align it along the center and then just flip it really carefully. Match the stripes of the half you already have cut out with the rest of the fabric. I think the method where you don't use the paper pattern anymore, where you use the half of what you have already cut out to flip it over, it could be more exact because you're actually matching the fabric with the fabric. Here, when we do it with the paper, we are relying that we marked the stripes correctly. For this front, I am matching it like this with the paper there. So I'm very happy that everything's correct. And now I can go ahead and cut the other half. Here is the front piece of the Vivace Dolman. I have marked my pleat marks and the marks along the neckline to do the collar afterwards. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with the back. Repeat the whole process. The back doesn't have this neckline, so it will be easier. It will just have a small rounded neckline on the top. This section is the most crucial one. This is where the matching starts. Right here underneath the dolman sleeve, that little corner has a beige stripe going across right on that corner. So that marks our first stripe. If you look at the other side, it's the same. This is the other side. You can see that little corner starts right at the beginning of a beige stripe, and then we have our first stripe, and that's how we matched it all the way down. To cut the back will be easier because I don't have fabric dangling down the table. This is the rest of the width of the same length of fabric. This must be over 60 inches wide, I suppose. I used the other half to cut the front, and now I have all these to cut the back. I checked and it will fit. Makes it easier because I don't have to worry about the fabric going anywhere, and I can just align it really smoothly along the table. I have my back piece here, and I've aligned every single mark along the edge of the sides so that the stripes are going to be exactly the same as they were on the front. Remember, I marked my pattern pieces at the same time, my front and my back, and they do have the same shape on the side, so they align perfect. So now I'm just going to cut this half. I have already marked along the center right there with a friction pen so that I know how to flip after cutting the first half. Okay, I hope you can see my faint red marks with a friction pen. It goes right along one of these ribs, very straight. That means that I'm perfect on the grain line, and I've put a pin there everywhere like that. That is how I'm going to flip this to the other side and not use the paper pattern. I just want to show you both ways and how they both work. So I'm going to fold this over, flip it right there. I had put pins here so that I can see where I'm folding, and it's along one of these ribs, so it makes it very easy to do, to go along the right fold. Now I can go ahead and align the sides to be exactly the same, be on the same stripe, perfectly aligned. You can see here, this is where the fabric is, marking where I'm going to cut the other side to make it even more exact and for the fabric not to move at all. You can go ahead and pin every other stripe. So now that I'm happy that I've aligned everything and everything is exactly the same, I can just go ahead and cut using the fabric as the outline to cut from instead of the paper. I actually find this method much more accurate because you are actually matching the fabric exactly. On the other one, you're relying that you've marked your paper correctly, and paper can shift a millimeter, you know. I like this method, but I've shown you how to do both. Okay, so here I've cut the back. I've used the same fabric to cut the other half. I like this method. I use it personally for all my stripe matching, either for woven or for knits. I think it just works much better if I can match the actual fabric to the other side. But I've shown you both ways. I know a lot of you might really want to work with the pattern piece. When you're careful to match the stripes at the same reference points, your shoulders are always going to match. There's no way they're not going to match if these match. Now for the collar pieces, I'm going to work with a structured knit. I just want to highlight that collar and that V-neck line in a contrast black rather than trying to cut it out of rib knit. Rib knit does not have the proper structure for a collar in my opinion, so I'd rather not use it for the collar pieces. Here I have the back pattern piece all cut out. It's all matching on this side and that side. They are identical everywhere. And now I have my front piece, and I'm going to put them right sides together, and we're going to do a quick check on the sides. Not that you can fix it now, but just to see how these stripes are going to match. Just going to align those side seams there. This is where the whole matching started, at that point there that started with a beige stripe. And you can see underneath it's exactly the same, and then it goes matching every single stripe as we go down. They're right on top of each other all the way down to the hem. This is one of the shoulder seams. the stripes match along there. You can see the white stripe there, the white stripe there, and I want to match these at the seam allowance of 3/8. So I think this type of seam that you need to match where the stripe is going that way, it's just harder to match if you just want to use pins. It is a small area, so I'm going to hand baste this. When you want to match the stripe, you need to put your needle in through the start of a stripe. Make sure it's coming out on the other side on the same stripe. So I'm eyeballing the 3/8 here. I'm sure you can eyeball 3/8. It's a very common seam allowance to use. Here I'm going to reach this stripe, so I'm going to go through it right there. Make sure I'm coming out exactly on the same stripe on the other side so that they do match. And I keep going. Now we're getting to this stripe here. Make sure it goes in through one side and it comes out the same, that doesn't move, and keep hand basting across. Okay, here's another stripe. You just want them to be exactly one on top of the other at the seam line, not at the edge, because you're not going to be sewing this seam on the edge. It'll be 3/8 away from it. I'm very confident nothing is going to shift and move and that these are going to match. When you look at this, that's how it's going to look on the other side. That should match there. That should match right there. That's what we're looking for. So just confirm with your basting that it is matching, and now we can just go ahead and sew it. I have a stretch needle number 90, just polyester thread, and I'll just use a straight stitch. Okay, let's have a look. Super good match right there, right there, right there. That's the goal. That when you wear your garment, the stripes are matching like that on the shoulder seams. And you see that if you manage to match the side seams and have everything correct there, the shoulders are going to match. I've been showing you several options to match stripes, and I've just matched them with pins on a small section because I don't really prefer doing this, but I know you might want to do that. So you just put a pin on the start and the stop of every single stripe. When you're pinning, you need to make sure the pin's coming out on the other side on the same stripe, and you will sew with your seam allowance and you pull out the pins a second before the needle's going to go over it. I've got a shallow zigzag stitch there. See, as I pull it out just as it's about to go over it. I've done that just partially on one section because I would rather hand baste this for sure, and it does work with the pins. You can see the stripes match, but for my comfort and precision and ease of sewing without pulling pins, I'm going to match the stripes by hand basting the same way I did at the shoulders. Here you can see the hand basting. I'm very confident the stripes are going to match and I don't have to deal with the pins. I think hand basting is even quicker than matching every single stripe with a pin. You'd need like 200 pins, so I would recommend this, but you just need to test and see what you like. So it's so nice to sew without having to be pulling all the pins out. I wanted to show you the side seam here where it's not even noticeable. There's the seam right there going down, and you can see how each stripe matches so well that it looks like there's not even a side seam there. Hand basting and pinning works. You choose what you like. They are both going to work, and it's very well worth going through that extra effort to have this look like this. This project that I've sewn to match the stripes horizontally, to match them on the side seams and on the shoulder seams, has a full guest blog post for the website at Love Notions. I will link below so you can check out the blog post I wrote for Love Notions all about this. It has much more detailed information than what I could show in the video in a written way, so I think both this video and that blog post will complement each other really well, along with many photos so you can cement this type of technique and you can try it yourself. So this is the one I made. I chose to do the collar in a contrast black. Anything that requires structure like this collar, or if you're trying to do like the Breckenridge Henley and you want to do the band with a rib knit, it would just not work. It's just way too floppy, way too stretchy. It won't hold up the structure. So I never planned to use the rib knit for the collar. I think the collar is always highlighted beautifully when it's done in a contrast, the same way I've done it here. If I just use the same print, you wouldn't really see it. You'd just see a V neckline. And it's just much more than that. It's got all this shape right there. So I think the black works beautifully. This is a Supplex athletic knit, medium weight knit, a little bit heavier than the rib knit. So it works perfectly for this that requires a little bit of structure. Love that. There's no stripe matching there, but what I was careful with was to have the beige stripe right across the middle. That is the only precaution I took there. And then at the shoulders, you see that they match beautifully. You saw how that was achieved. You don't actually need to worry about the shoulders if you've managed to match the side seams. They will always match. You can see that is very beautiful right there. And then when you look at this dress, you can't even see where the side seam is, literally. Where is it? There you can see, maybe you can see the side seam a little bit, but it's basically imperceptible because the stripes are matching every single place. And this was a long seam, a lot of stripes. Sometimes when I sew shorter sections of stripes, I just put a pin in every single section like you saw me do on a small part. But I wasn't willing to do that with this one. I was actually already feeling a bit dizzy with the stripes. So I found the hand basting much more accurate and faster and easier. And then when you sew your side seam, it's just pin free and amazing to sew. So that was a good experience. I left it unhemmed. It hangs beautifully. It does not unravel, doesn't curl up. Looks really nice. If I tried to fold it up and sew it, when I sew, it will start stretching and it would look terrible. Let me tell you how terrible rib knit looks when it's hemmed. I am not a fan. So I've left it there. I have purchased rib knit cardigans and things in the past that just hang raw and they look amazing. So there's a time and a place. I don't know if you can hear the thunder. I think it will start pouring. I will have to talk less. This is my knit Vivace Dolman dress in a rib knit with horizontal stripes, and I have stripes matching everywhere. I've shown you how to do all that, and it's just a little bit of extra time to cut, but very well worth it for the look. That is so much better than what you can buy in the shops. I really love this length above the knee. I did add length to this pattern so that it hits me above the knee. I'm just a little bit taller. A contrast black collar that is made with a knit that is a little bit more structured than the rib knit. The rib knit definitely is not a good material to do this collar with. I really enjoy my belts with dresses that are looser fitting. It can always be worn without as well. I just prefer it with the belt. That's how it looks without the belt. Very loose, very easy to wear. Side seams match all the way down. You can't really see where the side seam is because all the stripes just go all the way across both sides. Here you can see exactly why I chose to do the collar in a black. I think it just makes the dress look extra pretty. It just gives it something extra and highlights this beautiful shape that the Vivace Dolman has. If I did it with a stripe, it would just be annoying, and the rib knit is definitely not appropriate for this type of structure that the collar needs, so I'd rather avoid that at all costs. I pull my hair to the side. You can see how beautifully these stripes match right there. You don't need to worry about that. If you've managed to match your side seams, these are going to match and they are going to look exactly the same. I don't think you'll ever regret matching stripes. It's always worth it to get this beautiful look on the shoulders and pretty imperceptible side seams right here with these stripes. Really recommend taking your time to do it and to wear your stripy matching dress or top proudly out. Always worth it. We have the time and we can do so much better than non-matching ready to wear things that we can see in the shops. Here I have another look for you. I've put my newly made composed robe. You know, this is a robe, I've already shown it before, but the fabric I chose makes it totally possible to be used also just as outerwear, like a cardigan, something like that. So my ties are just there, and I have my Vivace underneath with my boots, and this could be a perfect autumn winter outfit for me. The Dolman sleeve of the Vivace is a short sleeve. I know a lot of you are headed to the colder weather. I want to provide you something extra that you can do to any Dolman top that you have. And as a bonus in this video, apart from showing you how to match the stripes, I'm going to show you how to create your own sleeve piece that starts where this Dolman sleeve ends and ends up where you want it to be. It could be 3/4, could be full length. And now we are not doing anything difficult at all. I promise you, the only measurement you need is what this measures and then what you want your wrist to measure, and then the rest is extremely easy. So let's see how that's done. To make a really easy extension to this Dolman sleeve that is not extending the Dolman sleeve but having a separate piece, first you need to pin the paper pieces at the shoulder seams. I've pinned the front and the back together here, 3/8 seam allowance, and I've drawn a green line across this so you can see what that is. So the total armhole now will form a little bit of a curve. This is the back, that's the front. What you see there is a slight curve. And that's why you need to do this to be able to draw the sleeve piece with the same curve. You can't just draw a rectangle. This is not a rectangle and it's not the way the Dolman sleeve hangs on the body. Up closer you can see where I've pinned it together there. And I have drawn the seam allowance that the pattern uses here. That's 3/8 of an inch, so I've drawn that with a blue line. What I have here is just a piece of paper. I have drawn a green line across the center. That will be the grain line of the sleeve, and the section that will match the shoulder seam right here of this piece. So I'll slide this under, slide it under this piece, make sure the green line I marked right there matches the shoulder seam. This is going to be the grain line of the sleeve. With a tracing wheel, I'm going to mark on top of that seam allowance line I had drawn on this curve there. So you can see my blue line that I had marked there, the seam allowance, 3/8. So with the tracing wheel, I'm just going to mark right through so I can see the mark on the other side. While I was working on this Vivace, I took the golden opportunity to measure how much longer I needed my sleeve to be in relation to this Dolman sleeve. I'll measure from the seam line right there. That's what I'm going to measure on the sleeve piece that I'm going to make. And just measure down. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but I'd like my sleeve to be 17.5 inches finished, plus 1 inch of hem allowance. So my sleeve piece that I'll draw will be 18.5 inches long, measured from there, from the seam line, not from the edge. I know the length that my sleeve piece needs to be, but I also need to know how wide to make it at the wrist. Let's start with 10, is what I use with woven things. Could be smaller. So considering that the seam allowance will take away 3/4 of an inch, there's 3/8 and 3/8 on the other, let's take away that. 9.25 inches is good. I never want a neat sleeve to finish like this. So 9.25 plus the 3/8 on both sides of the sleeve is 10 inches. So the bottom of my pattern piece will measure 10 inches. That's what I like. Now we just need to draw how long the sleeve is going to be. You saw that I wanted my extension to be 18.5 inches, including 1 inch of hem allowance. So from the seam line there, from that blue line down, I'm going to measure those 18.5. Remember, I wanted the bottom of my wrist to measure 10 inches, including the 3/8 seam allowance you're going to use on the sides. So from that middle section right there, I'm going to measure 5 inches out there, 5 inches out there. Here you can see the bottom of the sleeve. Remember, I wanted 1 inch of hem allowance, and that's included in this measurement, so I might as well just draw my inch right there. Okay, so now you can see the whole thing again. Now it's just about uniting this section here to there. Draw the line there, and on the other side up to where the hem will be. We have drawn the sleeve. I'm going to mark on the sleeve here that this is the front and that this is the back, just as reference. Now we can remove this. On this section is where we are going to see the mark that our tracing wheel made. So I'm just going to draw that on. I can see the little holes punched through the paper. And you can see the curve starting to form there. Now to this I need to add a 3/8 seam allowance. This line is matching the seam line that the dolman armhole had. So now we need to add 3/8 to this. Now on these extremes you can see that this comes out like that. It's a shape that the sleeve has. And so to true this out just manually, just bring this in like that. You have a weird little thing right there. That's how this area will be trued to that sleeve opening that has a curve on the dolman. So just cut it out like that. So I've cut up to there. You've seen me do this before multiple times and I always do it, so I keep showing you. Fold this as you would when you do your hem. Fold away your hem allowance and then just cut on the sides. And now you can cut the bottom. Voila, you will have your sleeve piece. Remember the green line is the grain line right there. And you'll cut 2 of them and just put them on your dolman armhole extended on the flat. At this stage, the shoulder seams have been sewn and so has the neckline. You can see the crossover V right there. And so I've pinned my sleeve piece to this dolman type armhole, right sides together. And I want to show you that weird little shape I created on my pattern piece and how it's going to make sense here. Remember my pattern piece had these weird little triangles that I cut out to true the shape of the dolman sleeve. There is a curve coming down on the dolman sleeve, so it looks really weird, but I want to show you how it makes sense here. Okay, here's one of the ends of the sleeve. You can see that on the top of that triangle, that's the seam allowance where you're going to sew the sleeve onto this armhole. And then it curves in like that. When this is folded in like this, when you sew that, you press the seam allowance towards the sleeve. Look how that takes the shape of the sides perfectly there. So that's why the need of that little triangle there. I did eyeball it, but it just needs to make sense, and that's how that's going to match. If I hadn't have done that truing, I would have a weird sort of jagged excess there, and that's not cool. You can always trim that away, but just doing it right from the get-go is always a good idea. And you know, you always press seam allowances down towards the sleeve, so that's why I've trued it in that way. I want to show you how this looks sewn. So I have the sleeve piece on top, and you can see the little triangle there. I've serged it first and then I've sewn it. And so on the tip of that triangle is where you start sewing your 3/8 seam allowance, right? So you go over there, there's the shoulder seam, there's a little notch I marked to match that, and then you get to the other side and it also finishes on the tip of that triangle. So when I extend this, press my seam of the sleeve towards the sleeve, you can see how it's perfectly trued on that curve there of the dolman sleeve shape. So this was sewn in on the flat, so you'll sew the side seam and then go off and sew the sleeve at the same time. Seam allowance is towards the sleeve, and you can see how that takes that curve perfectly. As you saw, this second dress also has stripes, but vertical stripes. The best thing about vertical stripes is that you don't need to match anything. You know, you're not trying to match anything on the sides, nothing like that. And this particular fabric has stripes that have different widths and they don't follow any particular pattern at all. It's not that you have like one thin one wide one, and there's like a repeat. It just doesn't have that. This fabric was just random, so there's no way you can match shoulder seams or anything like that. The only area I did want to match so that it makes sense visually was this collar piece right there. The dress has vertical stripes and I cut the collar with the stripes going horizontal, and I wanted these to be at the exact same place. You saw how I drafted that sleeve to follow that curve there. Very easy, and then the rest of the sewing is just very relaxed. Here is my stripy dress, vertical stripes, horizontal collar. It looks absolutely beautiful. Look how these match right there. So nice. The dolman sleeve extension to make it long is right there. You saw how easy that was to draft and to sew and to true to that curved shape underneath the sleeve. Very easy. You can apply this technique to any other top that's a dolman that you want to create an extension for. I think creating a separate piece for the sleeve is always going to be better than just trying to draw out a really long dolman sleeve. When you do that, you end up with no stretch on this section like that. because the stretch is going this way on a knit. You know, you have your stretch going across. And so if your sleeve piece is extended like that, it means that you won't have any stretch around this section and you might end up with really tight sleeves. Also, they just don't hang sometimes very well. I would always think that adding on a sleeve piece is better. And you saw how easy that was to do. Twin needle hem up, very easy. And then at the bottom, the same. I did actually hem this one. At the back, that's how the collar looks. It'll be all covered with my hair, but it's beautiful. It's just a striking look. I think it just highlights the feature of this beautiful collar. This is my knit Vivace Dolman dress length. I did some length adjustments to this one, added about an inch around here and then 2 inches down below for a total of 3 extra inches for the length to fit my knee. I've added the long piece extension that I've shown you how to do in the video, and beautiful vertical stripes. You don't need to match any of the stripes here, only a little bit here on the collar. I've got it with a belt. You can see the stripes going down there, and at the side there's absolutely nothing to match. Very easy to sew, and because I drafted my own sleeve piece, it is exactly the length it needs to be for my body. So that's always the best when you make your own little extra pattern pieces, because you can measure yourself. Here you can see my beautiful collar. You can see the stripe matching that I did just across there. This is the only area of the garment I took some care. Very easy to do. I didn't do anything crazy with this one. The sleeves fit beautifully. They fit really well on the dolman armhole that we created. Instead of hemming it or putting the little band, it just extends the use of this pattern to the whole year. Really love this neckline. I think it's the most beautiful neckline I sew, and that's why I've made it so many times. It's always a very enjoyable sew. I really enjoy it. You know, you can use stripes in any way that you want. You can take the extra time to match it beautifully, or you can just not take that much time and still have a really striking stripy dress. These concepts that I show you today can be applied to any other pattern. I've just chosen the Vivace Dolman because it's a great pattern to highlight and it's one of my favorites. And it's also only $5 today. So if you want to get this pattern, you can go ahead and get it for much less today. It's a really good pattern that could take you through all the seasons with this little sleeve extension that I showed you how to sew. I really hope you enjoyed this video and got some practical tips for your own sewing. I'd love to hear your experience with stripe matching, and if you have projects that you would love for me to see, I'd be really happy for you to tag me on Instagram or send me an email with your picture. I'd love to know your successes and your progress with your own sewing. Don't forget to visit the blog post I wrote for Love Notions. It's linked down below. I put my heart and soul into that blog post, so I really hope you go ahead and read it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.